Hi guys, Jackie M here. Now in this sixth episode of Asian Cooking with Thermomix, Zona and I are going to show you how to roll and pleat your own spiral curry puffs. So take a look.
Two different types of dough, a water dough and a
Yeah.
oil dough.
Yeah.
So showing you how it works on the Thermomix and how quick it is to
Yeah.
make those two doughs and then obviously start doing the handwork.
Yeah. Now we're going to start off by making the filling first. So let's just get some of the. I've got some chicken mince here that we're going to throw into the bowl. I'm just using half of it because we don't want to do too much. And I've got some pre-made curry paste. I make this myself. I didn't want to have to show you from scratch. So we'll cover curry paste and curries and that sort of stuff in a separate episode further down the track. Okay, so yeah, about that much. As usual, I don't measure anything, as you can see. And I've got some potatoes. These have been chopped up. You can actually chop it up in the Thermomix bowl. And that's what I usually do, actually. But I just kind of roughly chopped it up with my cleaver, my Victorinox cleaver. And what I did next was I boiled some water in a kettle, and then I chucked the cubed potatoes in the thermo server. And okay, I'm just gonna turn this on for about say 10 minutes or so, 100 degrees, and I'm gonna reverse it. Okay, let this cook, and we'll cover it. See how it turns out. I don't usually add water or any coconut milk in that. You want basically curry puffs. You want a dry curry. And what I used to do in my restaurant, actually, with curry puff filling, I use leftover curries from my buffet and kind of like, yeah, so that's a pro tip there for you. So if you've got any leftover rendang or something like that, that works quite well. So you want to kind of like break up the meat a bit. So what I do is I transfer any leftover rendang or leftover chicken curry from my restaurant and then simmer it in a saucepan and add more seasoning to it, just to kind of like bring out the flavors a little bit. Because what you want, you got to remember with the curry puff is that you're using the filling in several layers of dough, so you want the flavor to really kind of like be a little bit stronger. And usually with Malaysian curry puff, I mean, there's so many recipes out there. I'm not going to say which one's right or wrong, but usually with curry puffs, I like a little bit of sweetness in the filling. So I would actually add more sugar in and more chicken seasoning powder, and then we would simmer it till the meat is soft and like falling apart, and then we'll throw in some potatoes and mix it up as well. And that's my curry puff filling for the next day's tray.
No
okay.
waste.
Yeah, that's right, no waste. Otherwise, with any curries, because when you're operating a big restaurant, operating a restaurant, you can't really obviously cook curry to order. So usually what we would do is prepare them before the start of trade and have like batches of beef, chicken and lamb, and they'll be sitting in the food warmer for the duration of your trading day. And then at the end of the night, you don't want any leftovers, you don't want to reheat the next day as curry again, but you can actually use it for like filling. And that's just like using sandwich filling. You know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and then you are kind of cooking it again, so it's heating it up. But that's great. That's a great tip to know that you're using it as a filling. And if you've seen our previous episodes, it would be similar with making the little pows because they use the char siu meat.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
If you had chicken meat, you can even make a curry version.
Yeah.
So instead of using this pastry dough, you can probably use the pow dough and then make a steamed version.
Yeah. The other thing was that it was interesting you mentioned the char siu, because if you go to Chinatown or any of those places that sell barbecued duck, leftover duck they actually use for other dishes, right? So usually Chinese restaurants will have standing orders for leftover duck from those barbecued duck places. So you never, because they're not gonna have duck hanging there that day and then resell it the next day. They get rid of it at the end of the trading day, and they go to a restaurant and the restaurant might use it in a stir fry or use it in whatever, or in fried rice or whatever, where you don't have to have that fresh, crispy, hot.
Just reusing the meat.
Yeah,
for other dishes.
that's right. So I know because I actually used to try and buy them, and they say, oh no, it's all been all pre-ordered by other places, so they were speaking to
So get in there quick.
Yeah. Now, so with the dough, okay. Now, with Malaysian curry puffs, I mean, All right, guys, I just want to put it out there because I get a lot of flack for this every time, right? Especially from Indonesians. But when I say Malaysian, it's only because that's my frame of reference because I'm Malaysian, right? But Malaysian curry puffs, the more popular version or the more commonly known version is what we call spiral curry puffs. Okay, and people are always really fascinated with how you get the spiral pattern on them. And the way you create that is by actually using two different types of dough. If you can imagine making croissant or making those filler pastry and that, so it's essentially the same concept, right? So basically, if you look at any recipes online, you'll find that they refer to the water dough and the butter dough, and that's what they mean. And the butter dough, we can start on that first. Butter dough, I usually prefer to mix that by hand because I tend to find that if I use it in a dough mixer, that it can, you can risk having the butter whipped too overly whipped, and then it becomes moussey, and that's a problem when you're wrapping. You don't want it, you want it fairly solid. So with the butter dough, you want an almost 1-to-1 ratio of butter, in terms of weight anyway, butter to flour. So let's just make some over here. I'm not measuring anything, but usually when I'm making this, I would use about, let's just grab some bananas, if you don't mind, just over there. What I usually do, after I put this in, don't do what I just did, because I got carried away talking. Okay, so you've got some butter and you want to cut it up into chunks, right? You can actually still mix it in the Thermomix, you just got to be very, very quick about it. Okay, and don't mix it.
Shorter time.
Yeah, very, very short time, and don't over process it. But like I said, usually I prefer to just kind of, especially the butter is already a little bit soft, just break it up, right? And add flour to it. Like I said, about if I was doing a smallish batch, I would have about 650 grams of flour, plain flour, to about 500 grams of butter. Okay, so I might get you to do this. If you want to just mix it to the point where essentially it becomes a fairly solid dough. You don't want it, like I said, don't overwork it to the point where it's going to be too moussey and too soft, because that will be a problem when you start rolling out the dough.
And I think I remember doing this in school where you wanted a very crumbly type of dough.
Yeah, that's right.
Just use your fingers.
That's right, yeah.
Stretch it up.
That's right, yeah. You get it crumbly and then eventually they all start gelling together. And I'll keep an eye on this because I didn't measure anything, but you may need more flour, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so this is just cooking away. We really just want to cook the chicken legs here through, and just make sure that the potatoes mix well with it. The potato and the filling will continue to soften when you're deep frying the curry puff. So don't worry about trying to, it's not a fixed art. So it doesn't matter if the potato is too soft or whatever anyway, because it's all, you bite into it. And people don't get any special kind of pleasure out of like being able to taste the chunks of potato in there.
So you're basically cooking 2 or 3 times anyway, because this one you want the flavor to seep into the potatoes, and then later on when we make the curry puffs, we'll be frying it as well, so that's already making it cook.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Times.
I'm just going to add a bit more curry paste to this. This curry paste was actually specifically made by my staff for curry puff filling, so it does actually have an extra injection of flavor in it, a bit more sugar and a bit more seasoning flavor in there, sort of thing. But usually if you were using just a straight out curry paste, or you were using a curry paste that was meant for something else, I would actually add more sugar and more seasoning, chicken stock granules in it, or vegetarian stock granules in it, okay? And always just adjust the flavor as you go along.
So I'm already adding a bit more flour to it, because the butter is very soft, and you can see the quantities, the difference with it.
Okay, cool, right here. And what you want to do is just kind of like press it in together, okay? So you want it fairly solid. Okay, let's just add a little bit more flour to it. Okay, and I'm just going to hold this up to the camera so people can see. Okay. So don't overwork it, that's very, very important. So you've got these bits of flour, and you just want to kind of like compress it. You want it fairly hard, okay? You don't want it soft. Okay. As soon as the butter breaks up, just try and like compress it back up together. And then what you want to do from here on, okay. Okay, so this is
fine. You're just using hands and gloves.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, from here on, what you want to do, like I said, you want to compress these. What you want to do is just kind of like create like balls about the size of, what size would you call this? Okay.
Depending on which country you are in 20-cent coin.
Yeah, it's probably about 2/3 of a 20-cent coin here. 2/3 or 3/4 of a 20-cent coin sort of thing. So you want balls about this size. They don't have to be perfectly round. Just make sure, like I said, make sure that they're well compressed, okay? So I might get you to just do that if you want to just do about maybe about 10 or so. Yeah. Cool. Let's see how this is coming along. And then the next, the what we call the water dough is going to, ideally you would want to use a slightly higher gluten content flour, but I mean, a lot of the time I don't bother. So this is actually just straight plain flour, okay?
So would you normally use 2 different types of flour for the 2 doughs?
Yeah. So the butter dough you can use plain flour, and the water dough you would usually, like I say, in an ideal world, use high gluten flour because that creates the stretchiness in your dough. But if you're using just plain flour, you got to remember use less water in it because the gluten actually helps absorb water. So whatever recipe you're using, just kind of like use less water if you're using plain flour as opposed to high gluten flour. Okay, yeah, good. And with curry puffs in Malaysia, a lot of people don't realize that we use the kind of ingredients we use in our cooking can surprise some Westerners because we use a lot of sardines, right? Canned sardines, right?
Yeah.
Even in martabak, which is like a flat bread, that's filled with egg and onion and that sort of stuff. There's sardine martabak, and then there's sardine curry puffs, and there's sardine spring rolls as well. Because it's funny because the last time I made the curry puffs and posted a photo of it, people were asking, is it potato or sardine? I was thinking, it's neither. It's beef or chicken. Usually my versions tend to be beef or chicken, depending on what curry I have left over.
That's interesting. Well, Jackie, I know there's actually also 2 versions in Malaysia that you can find. Not all of them have the spiral curry puff.
Yeah.
Some people call the spiral curry puff the Nyonya style.
Is that right? Really?
And then you've got the traditional one where I think they use more of a plain type of batter. Yeah,
that's right. So you might see the ones without the pattern will be the regular ones. And also in Malaysia, we almost always deep fry our curry puffs. So we're going to do that. And but I know there are some customers of mine who take them home and bake them. I don't think the baking is going to do it any favors in terms of creating that light.
Especially with the spiral curry puff, it actually looks better fried.
Yeah.
So the baking effect doesn't actually give it unless you use your own puff pastry. So I mean, if you don't want the effort to roll out butter and the oil dough and the butter dough, then puff pastry could also be an option.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you want like your puff pastry, when you bake it, it's so easy. If you've got curry puff filling, you just like cut your sheet of puff pastry into 9 squares, and then just fold them into triangles and just pinch the sides, and then chuck them in the oven. And that's what my mom used to do when we came out. And they will look completely different. And you got to glaze the surface with some egg wash as well, sort of thing. But it'll be a completely different animal altogether. But I have seen actually, in fact, I just remembering now, because I've been in this business for so long, when I first started out, I did in fact use puff pastry and deep fry it.
Okay.
And it'll puff up and it'll be kind of like, you'll get all these kind of like bubbles. Yeah, it will bubble up. And also it doesn't stay crispy. You gotta eat it right away, otherwise it just goes soft and soggy.
It doesn't have that same effect. Well, if you're baking, then it's probably nice. So
you're
concerned about frying compared to baking, then use puff pastry.
That's the best bet. Save you doing all this. Okay.
I think I noticed a lot of Malaysian style, or even because it's all about people. It's getting people together. If you've got hens and
Yeah.
people want to sit down and do something, why not make cookies?
Yeah. It's a very communal. A lot of Malaysian sweets and snacks are very communal activities. So I like that whole vibe of like, you know, having half a dozen people standing around or sitting around and chatting and doing this and doing that. It's quite cute.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's something a little bit of something from a bygone era. Unfortunately, nowadays people are all sitting around texting.
I know
and whatever.
everyone wants to do it quick, and they don't actually want to sit down and get busy with their hands unless it's on the screen.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
That smells good.
So it just cooked through.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Nice.
that's what it looks like. I'll just hold it up to the camera. So we just got the chicken cooked through, and if you want, you could actually add some fried shallots in there, just to kind of like bulk it up a little bit, but we won't bother with this. Okay. And what I'm going to do, let's take this out. We're going to have to wash the bowl, and let's just use this one. And once we've washed the bowl, we're going to start making the water dough. And I've found with the Thermomix that it's been a lifesaver in terms of making the water dough, because usually I used to use like a regular dough mixer for my curry puff dough.
Yeah.
And I know with dough mixers they come with shields and whatever, but I always end up like with my whole work surface like this, yes, you know,
Flour.
covered with flour that spat out of the dough mixer. So it was always a bit of a pain to make. Nowadays, with the Thermomix, because it's all entirely a closed system, I can make like a batch of like 20 curry puffs for Noah, my son, my baby, you know, and not have to worry about creating a big mess in the kitchen. So that's one of the things that Thermomix has kind of like brought to our day-to-day. The fact that I can make curry puff on the fly without having to kind of like turn my kitchen upside down. I'm just kind of like making these butter balls a little bit bigger. And at some point we're going to bring the camera up closer to us so you can see how I do the rolling and the pinching. Okay. And then what we're going to do, we're going to actually start up some oil, heat up some oil for the deep frying as well. Okay, but we'll do this. And when you're deep frying curry puffs, you want the oil temperature about 180 degrees. Every time I talk about deep frying, because people, when they buy my curry puffs from my outlets, they go, oh, you know, can I buy this frozen and do it myself at home? And I say, oh, you know, yeah, you're gonna fry it up, and then say, oh, I don't have a deep fryer, sort of thing. That always seems to be like a stumbling block for Australians, but I always tell them I don't have a deep fryer either. You know, we Asians do deep frying either in woks or in saucepans and that sort of stuff. You don't need a deep fryer.
No,
You just need a bit of oil.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just kind of like bump these up a little bit
Yep.
more. Okay, so now the dough, right? There are a few things that go into the dough. Pretty straightforward. I've got the flour. Like I said, if you've got bread flour, use bread flour. I'm just using plain flour here, so I'm using a little bit less water. I've got water, lemon juice, a bit of salt, and butter. Okay, so those are the ingredients that are going in there. We're gonna use the scales here, and I'm going to use about 240 grams. Okay, so 250.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm gonna put the water in here. There's 120 mils of water in here. Okay, and I want to get about 30 grams, 35 grams of flour, of butter. Okay. 10 grams. That should be about right. And I'm just gonna squirt a little bit of lemon juice in there. And so half a teaspoon of salt or so. Okay, that's it. Let's cover it up. Okay, and then we're going to put it on the dough function. Okay. And let it go for a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, I'm gonna start heating up some oil.
Getting ready to fry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'll move this one.
And I'm just using one of my smaller Scanpan pots. And you want enough oil to be able to submerge the curry puffs in.
So if you don't have a deep fry, a deep pot saucepan will actually work because what you want is enough oil to coat the size of your curry puff. You don't actually need anything huge.
Mhm.
Is there any particular types of oils that you prefer for it?
No, I'll just use any vegetable oil. Yeah. And you're going to find, if you're deep frying, like what I just did was I've actually got some leftover oil from one of my saucepans in the kitchen, and just you're going to find, because I've used this to fry curry puffs before, you're going to find there's some residual flour at the bottom, and that's why I transferred it into my Scanpan, and then I'm just kind of like left the residual crap. Otherwise, that's going to transfer onto your curry puffs while you're frying, and then just cause the look to be not that great. Okay.
So the water dough's done.
Okay. Let's see how it looks. Okay. Let's work it a little bit
Longer.
Yeah. Let's work it for another 30 seconds. It's looking good actually, and the texture is just about right. I'll just show you. I could probably add a little bit more water,
Yeah.
but probably maybe just half a tablespoon or so.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's essentially like that. If it's too sticky, you can add more flour to it, so just adjust everything. So
About much?
Yep. And let's get rid of some of these things out of the way. And usually you would want the curry puff filling to cool down a little bit before you use it, otherwise it's going to kind of like melt the butter in the dough.
I think that's the same with any filling though. You always want it cool enough and then it's not so much, it doesn't have that much liquid anymore.
Yeah, that's right. So you want your filling to be quite dry, right? Okay, this is what it looks like. And this will keep in your fridge for about a week. In your freezer a little bit longer. So I don't generally like freezing my curry puff filling because when it defrosts, it does kind of get wet again as well. Okay, so this is just about perfect. Okay, so that's your curry puff dough. That's what it looks like. Okay, let's take them out. And we've only done like 240 grams of flour here because, like I said, you know, the Thermomix lends itself to making things in small portions. You can feed the kids with some curry puff when they get home from school. Okay, so I've just basically got about 2 fistfuls of flour here. Okay.
It's even great as a lunch hot snack.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And the other thing I've got to mention as well, Westerners get really hung up about how everything has to be piping hot, but in Malaysia we don't buy our curry puffs hot, right? We just, they fry it at the street store sort of thing. Yeah. It's you eat it at room temperature. People get really freaked out. They come back, oh, is this meant to be hot? No, it's not.
Oh, unless you're buying it frozen, then please do.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, you can eat it hot, but yeah, no, generally we eat it like kind of like room temperature-ish. Okay, so we've got the dough here, and then we've got the butter dough that we've balled up. Okay, and what I want to do now is actually I might get Zona to help position the camera in a minute. When you're ready, no hurry. So with this dough, you see the size of this? You want this to be about double the size of it, okay? So usually I'll just use my finger and just kind of like scoop it out like that. And everything is very agak-agak, which means guesstimate in Malay. Okay. Some of them are a bit big. You can always like tear a little bit out of some of them and then transfer them to others. Okay, so I'm just kind of like getting an extra portion just by tearing a little bit out of the bigger ones. Okay, I'm just gonna hold this up. Yep. So as you can see, this is the water dough and this is the butter dough. It's about twice the size of it.
Even
so
the
what
colour is quite distinct. You can see
Yeah.
the
So the camera's going to wobble a little bit while Zona kind of like tries to work out the positioning. I'll let you decide how you want to do this. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. No. So I've got a rolling pin here. Okay. This is something I picked up at Asian grocery stores. They're super cheap. Yeah. The Chinese like to use smaller rolling pins. Okay.
That's great for dumplings too.
Yeah, that's right. That's primarily what they use for. So I've got like the water dough here. I've got the butter dough. And what you want to do is just kind of like make a dent in the middle of the water dough and wrap the butter dough in it. Okay, just like that. And just do it for the rest of them. It doesn't have to be that perfect. The butter dough, I think we ended up being a little bit more crumbly than I would have. Usually it would have been a little bit more buttery. Doesn't matter, but you get the idea. If you were following the recipe, you wouldn't go wrong with it. It's just we were just kind of like
Going off
rushing
the top
through.
of my
Yeah.
head.
Okay.
That's all right.
Okay. So that's that. But it's basically essentially almost a 1-to-1 ratio of water, of flour and butter. And that's all there is. That goes in there. Okay. So just that. Now, I'm just going to get rid of these. And these, the leftover butter dough, you can actually keep them in your fridge or freeze them. They'll last a very, very long time, so you can use them for your next batch, okay? So we've got these here now, and each one of these are going to make 2 curry puffs, okay? So what you want to do is just kind of like flatten it like that, and then roll it with your rolling pin like that, and then just use your hand like that, roll it up, okay? Turn it around, roll it again, and roll it up again. And that's what you're going to get. That's what it looks like, okay? And we're going to do a couple more. So flatten it like that once, roll it up once, turn it around 90 degrees, roll it again, and there you go. Okay, let's just do one more like that. Flatten it a little bit, roll it up, turn around, roll it again. Okay, now what we want to do with these is you want to cut them in half. Okay, so let me just grab the cutting board. I don't want to ruin.
Oh, the spatula.
That's all right. Okay, I'm a big user of choppers, so I'm just gonna chop this in half like this. Okay, this is what it's going to look like now. Okay.
You can see the pattern as well of the 2 different
Yeah.
doughs.
So we're just doing that with the other ones. Just cutting them in half. There you go. Okay, so you can just make out the pattern. Now, the important thing with doing this, and I don't always do this because, you know, if I have to make 400 curry puffs, I don't have time to kind of be doing this over the wok. But ideally, you want to make this fresh and roll it fresh. Because if you make it to this point or even to this point and then keep it in the fridge or the freezer, the butter and the water dough is going to kind of like, you won't see the distinct patterns as, you know, as well as you would have otherwise liked. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just flattening it. And you want it sort of like kind of like an oblong shape. Okay, so you can see the pattern a little bit here. And you've got the pattern on one side, and then you've got the smooth part on the other side. Okay, the smooth part is where you put your filling in. And I'm just going to, the filling's a little bit hot, so hopefully we won't have any problems with this. I'm putting about a tablespoon of filling in there because I'm greedy. Okay, and then what you want to do is first just fold it and pinch it like that. Okay, so you can see it like that so far. Now what you want to do is pinch it. I'm right-handed, I'm using my right hand, and this is how I do it. I have my thumb on the top layer, and then just basically you want to do this motion with the top thumb. You're gonna flipping it back and forth, okay, while you're holding with your index finger the bottom here. So you're flipping it like that, and then moving it across, and then you're using basically your thumb and index finger to kind of like pinch this. Okay, so you get the pattern. If it splits a little bit, doesn't matter, just kind of like pinch it and seal it. Okay, so that's your first curry puff. Let's do the next one. So again, you've got the pattern side, which is the side that you've just rolled. You want to flip it over, use the other side, stick some filling in it. Okay, you've got the filling. I'm just going to cut a little bit out. There you go. Just pinch the edges first to keep them in place like that, and then you're going to pinch it.
Beautiful.
Okay, let's do it. I'm paying attention to the camera while I'm doing this. So I'm not paying enough attention to the pleating.
I can do that.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so I've got that. Filling, and then just close it off like that, and then you go to pinching, use your thumb and your index finger, work it right around. Okay, and then what I used to do with my curry puffs, because I used to do vegetarian and meat versions, is that I would pleat them a little bit differently for the
different shapes so you can
yeah,
see.
just in terms of, I actually, interestingly enough, this was actually suggested by my Vietnamese staffer who was helping me with them, because we used to make them identical, and then sometimes, we'll forget which batch was vegetarian, which batch was meat, or, especially when we're selling them in big quantities, or one might fall into the other.
Yep.
But what we used to do with the meat ones, we used to pleat it like this, okay? And then towards the end, we'll kind of like drag it out a little bit and then tuck it underneath.
Oh,
okay?
cute.
So our meat ones will look like little
Tails.
Well, there's we used to have the vegetarian like this and the meat ones like that. So that's an idea you can try. Okay, I think the oil is hot enough. It may even be too hot, so I'm going to start tossing them in to the oil. Okay, and you don't want the oil too hot. I'm just going to turn it off, because if it's too hot, you're going to find that it will be too brown on the outside, but not cooked through properly on the inside. So let's just make a few more. I'm going to bring this back over here. And of course, because I'm using I'm using no temperature control at all for my oil. I'm just kind of like guessing when it's ready. But if you had to guess when the oil is ready, you would usually stick a pinch of dough and throw it in and see if it bubbles and floats up. Okay, that will give you a general idea that your oil is hot enough. It tells you if your oil is hot enough. It doesn't tell you if your oil is too hot. Okay, because if it's not hot enough, the piece of dough you throw in will just sink right down to the bottom. Okay. Okay, let's just try it. Let's see how it's going. Okay, so
Starting to golden.
yeah, starting to golden. Remember, I've turned off the heat at the moment because it was getting a little bit too hot. So one more time, if you want to see me make the rest of the curry puffs. And ideally, you would do like basically do that and then do this for like half a dozen at least before you cut them up and then move on to the next stage, because what that technically does is it lets the dough rest in between stages as well, and it just makes them a little bit easier to work. the whole idea with dough resting is because of the gluten content in the dough, it makes them like hard to work. So they might kind of like shrink back really tightly, and you have to roll really, really hard, and it will keep shrinking back. So you're kind of like fighting a bit of a battle with them. Whereas if you let it rest in between, it just kind of makes it a lot easier. Okay.
Would you ever roll one massive dough and then roll and then
I
cut it
don't.
up?
Like you could, but you wouldn't like. You want to actually keep them like you don't want to leave them out in the open for too long because the air is going to make them crusty.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's easier to manage with.
with smaller portions. Yeah. Okay. So if I had like an entire tray of like 100 like rolled dough, these are gonna start getting crusty.
Yeah.
And become hard to work as well. Okay, let's see how this is going. Okay, it's goldening up, and I'm just gonna turn the heat back on because I can tell.
You can start to see the layers. Too.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Okay, so that's. And Zona, you're taking all this home, by the way, because I've actually got another 20 or so curry puffs sitting in my fridge from yesterday and the day before. Noah loves them, but there's only so many you can eat in one sitting. Okay, so cut these up. And remember the potatoes, all I did was actually just cube them and then throw them in the thermo server with some boiling water from the kettle for about 10 minutes before I threw them in with the meat in the Thermomix to cook for another 15 minutes or so with some curry paste. Okay, so just lift it up, turn it around. Okay, so look at that. It's quite funny. About a month or two ago, when I posted this on social media, or posted a picture of my curry puff on social media, someone commented, "Oh, oh wow, your curry puffs look almost as good as mine." I was thinking, okay, what's your point? You want a job in my kitchen, or some people say the darndest thing.
Have you ever used a mold before?
No, I haven't, because the pattern to me just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've used a mold for other things, like making just kind of like for the heck of it. But no, to me, it becomes very obvious that you've used a mold on it. And
It's too even.
Yeah, and I don't think it holds together as well as you would hope to anyway, because the whole pinching, you're actually kind of like you're actually closing it like that, but also you're actually forcibly pinching down. So this is a very, very tight seal.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas with the mold, just clamping it down to me might not always cut it. Yeah. And this frying will usually take about 10 minutes total.
Yeah.
Like I said, don't have the oil too hot. About 180 would be perfect if you do have a deep fryer. And just just make sure that it doesn't sink completely to the bottom, because it'll be hotter on the bottom. It might scorch your curry puffs, especially if you're using a thin saucepan.
So don't be over tempted to fill your saucepan.
Yeah, that's right. Don't fry too many at a time. Okay, you got to break them up into batches. And also, if you notice, I've actually got this ladle in my Scanpan at the moment. It's because I'm just trying to kind of like make sure they don't completely sink to the bottom and just sit on the bottom. Okay,
so it's sitting on the ladle.
Yeah, it's kind of sitting on a ladle. And if you're using a wok, right, usually those Chinese iron woks are quite thin. You can actually buy these bamboo sheets at Asian grocery stores. Okay, they look like a little bamboo mat. Okay, usually they're about circular. And then what you would do is stick them in the wok, right, underneath the oil. It will sink down to the underneath anyway. And that acts as the layer between your food and your.
I never thought
your
about
wok.
actually frying with them.
Oh yeah, they do that. And then, but those bamboo sheets, I don't know how much they cost now, but they used to only cost like a few cents. I
Oh.
think maybe 30 cents or
Yep.
something like that. So you can pretty much use them as a, and throw them out,
Disposable.
because otherwise they do get quite oily
Yeah.
when you try and wash them.
Yep.
I mean, you could wash them and reuse them a couple of times, but they do
Yep.
get quite oily. But the point of them is to kind of like make sure your food doesn't touch the bottom of the wok when you deep frying. Okay, not all Asian grocery stores have them, but probably the more traditional ones and the ones that are slightly larger and do supply restaurants and that sort of stuff would be your best bet. Okay. And what I'm finding is certainly nowadays with a lot of Asian grocery stores out towards the city,
Yep.
they're not generally very well equipped anymore.
No.
Okay, let's just take these out.
Just
And-
basic things.
Yeah, and the reason for that is most people in the city don't actually do a lot of cooking from scratch. Okay, so let's take this out. Let's see
Ooh.
what it looks like.
It's a beautiful golden brown.
Okay, so there you go. So I'll let you know. Yep, that's the curry pot. Yep. I guess the camera can probably go back up whenever you're ready. So there you go, guys. I hope that's given you a bit of an idea how to make your own curry puffs. I know it's something that actually takes a bit of practice. Zona technically knows how to make it, but she probably just feels like she needs to get a few more under her belt before she feels comfortable pleating them.
The way your finger action is something that only someone who's been doing it over and over and
Yeah.
over again, you would have it down pat.
Yeah, that's right. So there you go. So that's that. It's quite interesting because I mentioned my Vietnamese staff who suggested pleating them different, right? And I tried to teach her how to do it for the longest time. She just could not do it. So hers was looking a little bit like kind of like all over the place. And then one day it just suddenly clicked. And then she started making it right. Yeah, and then it's just made it. I mean, you will get to that tipping point where it just becomes automatic and you don't even think about it. And it actually, I'm at that point where it's hard for me to actually describe how I do it because I don't even think
It's
about it.
automatic.
Yeah. So just don't give up and just keep practicing.
I'll try it off camera.
Yeah, okay, so we'll finish these off. But in the meantime, as we were saying, selamat makan.
Enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy.
Bye.
We'll see you next week.